I'm born in the Middle East. I'm an Arab, born and raised in the Middle East. I have relatives in Syria. I'm talking to them on a daily basis. I was in the Special Forces. I was behind enemy lines, and I was in the defense inside of Israel. I think I know a little bit more than Dave Smith about what's happening in Syria. And I mentioned how he went mumbling all around the place and not answering the one simple question.
Welcome back to
Ami's house.
All right, today we have the honor and the privilege of welcoming a special guest to Ami's house. Ladies and gentlemen, Mansor Ashkar. Ashkar, I want to get it right.
You said it right. You said it better than most.
Did I say it like an American, like an Israeli, or like a Druze?
I would say half American, half Israeli.
All
Not
right,
yet
well.
Druze. For the Druze, you'll have to say Ashkar. Which is very hard. Very hard to say that.
All right, well, I'll take an Ulpan in Druze pronunciation next time I come to Israel.
On me.
Okay, thank you. So, lots going on. I want to start the conversation off, and I know you've probably given this introduction many, many times as you are sharing your story, but to the audience out there, because a lot of people don't know, can you just briefly tell us about who the Druze are as a community, as a people, and what the relationship is like both to Israel, to Jews, and then to Islam and to Muslims? Like, where do Druze fall in this whole region of what's going on in the Middle East?
Yeah. So the Druze are a secret religion that have about 1 million of us all around the world, predominantly living in Syria, the majority, then Lebanon, then Israel, and then spread around the world. The Druze came from, they were revealed to the world from under the Muslim Empire. And that was during the time of the Khalifa, the Caliph, Hakim Amrillah in Egypt, where they brought their secret to the Khalifa there to give him the understanding of how they see the world and the religion and the way to the one God. That's why they were called many times Wahidun.
And what? How long ago was that? Because
that's 1,000 years ago. 1,000 years ago is the first time that we started hearing about them. And then in the beginning, Islam kind of liked it because they brought a very new age idea. They came and said that there's not only one religion that is right. There's many religions and they're all pointing to the same direction. It could be the Muslims, the Christians, the Jews. It could be the Hindus. It could be, any other religion. And they all have different teachings around the world and they have different prophets that came and they're all aiming to the same place. And Islam liked that 1,000 years new age religion in the beginning. It was under the Shia, mind you. The Shia were much more spiritual. Sunnah are much more orthodox. There's not a lot of playing room. In the Shia, you had many groups, including the Assassins. People know Assassin's Creed today. It was a Muslim faction of Hashishin, meaning the people who are high on weed, hashish. So they call them assassin. That's why the word Assassin's Creed came from. And many, many other factions.
Let me just download that factoid. That's a new one. What Mansor is giving us stuff the world has never heard. You are certainly the secret revealer, proving your case as a Druze.
As were the Druze, exactly. With, Hashish assassin, they actually had a crazy story. They were one of the last ones to fight against the Mongolians. When the Muslim pissed off the Mongolians, when they went and attacked their convoys, the Mongolians came and said, that's it, we're killing them all. And they went and did what they call as the Muslim Holocaust. They went and burned and killed and destroyed everything that they had, burned all their books. Only later they converted to Islam. That's why you have a lot of pictures of Muhammad that looks like an Asian. They had different pictures. One of the last ones to stand their ground were the Assassin's Creed, the Hashishin, which were living in these remote castles in the desert that was really hard to get. And they were fierce warriors that fought until the end. So they have a crazy story. But anyway, that's a side story. Back to the Druze. The Druze were one of these groups that came out of, under the Shia, the Islam. And after about 23 years, they started getting persecuted by Islam because Islam realized that they're preaching that there's no such thing as Muhammad is the last prophet, the seal of the prophet. Could be many prophets, many people will come in different directions. And that made them infidels. That made them kuffar. They need to be killed. That's where the Druze ran away from Egypt. And there's no more Druze in Egypt. And they went living in the mountains in Israel, Lebanon, and Syria. And later on, when the Jews went back to their ancestral land, and the boundaries of the state of Israel was created, the Druze had the same memo that the Palestinians basically had, call them Palestinians. Back then, there was no such thing as Palestinians. It was the Arab, the Muslims of the land, which said we're going to bring all of our armies to come and kill all the Jews from the river to the sea. And the Druze refused to join on that train. And they said, no, we're going to stay here and fight alongside the Jews and help protect them. And that's when the blood covenant created, but also the borders that we know today suddenly were established. So suddenly villages that were in Syria never saw again their relatives in Israel or in Lebanon. And we're seeing it right now with the war in Syria. A lot of the Israelis, they want to go and save their relatives. Just like I said, it's 1 million Druze all around the world. So every Druze that you meet today probably have some kind of a distant relative in Lebanon or in Syria. Same like the Jews, the Jews, there's 15 million around. Mm-hmm. So it's very easy to find Jews all around the world that have relatives in Israel.
So it's a small world. It's a small world in the Druze world. And through the Arabian conquest and through the Ottoman Empire, the Druze lived under in these same geography. They were Druze communities.
Yeah, and they lived in the mountains. They tried to keep themselves out of politics. They tried to keep themselves out of all kind of, the craziness that was going around. Many of them lived under what we know today as a taqiyya. Taqiyya is the permission in Islam to lie. Now, people use it in a very bad connotation. Lying in general is bad, but when you think about it, the Mossad lie all the time. CIA lie all the time. So many times you use deception and lie to keep yourself alive or to have an edge over your enemy. So the Druze in Syria and in Lebanon are still in some way living under taqiyya, which saying, we're kind of like Muslims. We're like you guys. Don't kill us. Leave us alone. The only place that Druze are proudly wearing their identity is in Israel, because that's the only group. And the Jews are the only ones in the Middle East that are allowing minorities to practice their faith, to come and say, we welcome you as you are. And the best example is while we're seeing Druze girls being kidnapped and becoming sex slaves by Bedouin tribes in Syria, we're seeing Druze girls in Israel who just sent a satellite to space. With SpaceX. So minorities in Israel have a much better life, and among them the Druze in Israel as well, they feel much more free. So just kind of in a nutshell, to zoom you in about the Middle East, that's kind of the story we're having right now.
A clarifying question, you talked about the blood covenant. Is that something that the Druze community made with Israel to say we are going to be part of this nation, this Jewish country, and be supportive of it? Is that what is the blood covenant? Is that an official event that occurred?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. The Druze see themselves as descended from Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses, the father of Zipporah. So when Moses was running in the desert, escaping the Egyptians, and he was a lost young man, Jethro welcomed him to his tribe, taught him how to, manage the politics and leadership, and even allowed him to marry his daughter. So the Druze see themselves as coming from there. So when the Jews came back, the Druze saw that's our ancient relatives. We guys are connected.
He had one of the best songs in The Prince of Egypt, by the way. If you ever saw The Prince of Egypt, Jethro's song is just killer. We all know it. So he's the patriarch. He's the patriarch of the Druze.
He's the OG, man. He's the OG. So the Druze, when Israel was created, in the beginning, when the Jews came back to Israel, it was like a sandbox of a lot of people fighting each other. Everybody was fighting everyone. The Jews were fighting the Muslims, the Druze, the Christians. Everybody was just fighting because, it's tribal kind of mentality. And very quickly, the Jews and the Druze realized that they have no incentive in killing one another. They don't want to convert one another. We just want to live in peace. And they made this blood covenant, which from then until today, the Druze and the Jews are basically the only religions in Israel that have all the rights and obligations. As a Druze man, I was, obliged like any other Jewish man to join the army. Many of the Druze in Israel are in special forces, in combat units, in the intelligence force, in the Supreme Court, in the government. We really integrated, but a lot of it came because of that blood covenant. The very wise people back then came and said, let's make Israel our home and build this country, make Israel great again, 48.
That's a really interesting contrast to, I guess, the people who call themselves Palestinians now, because I think what you hear from a lot of anti-Zionists is that, the Jews came into this land and there was no way to ever peacefully coexist with these people. And so they should never even tried, and they should leave, and they should this whole experiment. But there's another, correct me if I'm wrong, another Arab people who believe in, who have a similar religion to Islam, not the same, but similar, and they do peacefully coexist. Like that, it's almost like that could have been another way this all played out. This could, like in another universe with the Palestinians.
Finally, I'm hearing a Westerner say that. Finally, I'm hearing a Westerner say that. This is exactly it.
I guess what's the difference between the Druze and the Palestinians? Like, what is that difference that hasn't allowed peaceful coexistence with them, but has allowed it with the Druze?
And acceptance of Israel.
Yeah.
It seems like the Jews were like, we're this is what Israel is. We are going to integrate, and that first requires acceptance and then partnership.
Yeah,
right. Yeah. And benefit and give and benefit and
exactly that. The Druze had the same memo like the Muslims had when the Jews came here, and they've decided to live in coexistence and accept one another. The problem that the Palestinians refused that offer from the beginning. They came and said, "There's no two-state solution. There's from the river to the sea. We're gonna annihilate them all." And they tried several times, kept losing, and they made up, this whole victimhood narrative of Nakba and etc. While the Druze are the complete contrast to that, that ideology, you can call it. And that's why the Druze, strategy. That's why the Druze also are being very hated by many Muslims, not all, but by many Muslims in the Middle East, because they see them, first of all, as traitors. We didn't join with them. Second of all, we're making them look bad because they want to paint a very, very clear picture that Israel is an apartheid state, the Jews are like the Nazis, and that they hate the Arabs. But then comes someone and says, "Oh, well, what about the Druze? They're just Arabs just like you. How come they are so well integrated? How come they have a great life in Israel and are living terribly under any other Muslim country?" So it made it look very bad, and that's why they're trying to keep oppressing it all the time.
So that's interesting. Sorry, Michael.
I just want to follow up. Is there a theological difference between the Druze and the Muslims that doesn't allow Muslims to coexist, but does allow the Jews to coexist? And if you don't know, that's okay too. Yeah.
No, there is. We're opening a can of worms here.
Okay.
But I think, let's open it.
Yeah,
Muslims
like 10 minutes in, let's go for it.
Muslim as a religion want to dominate the world. They want the entire world to become Muslim. That's clear Quran teaching. They even divide the world into the house of war, Dar al-Harb, and the house of Islam. Anywhere that is not under Sharia law is called house of war, which you should wage jihad to go and conquer it and convert it to Islam. And that's a bit hard to live and coexist when someone that have this kind of mentality. The Druze have no incentive to make you join the religion. You can't. If the Jews, it's very hard. They make it very hard to convert. The Druze is not even possible.
It's all hereditary? It's purely hereditary? Sorry. Like to be Druze.
You can only be born Druze. Yeah, you cannot join. There used to be days where you can marry even outside, but that even got closed. I know I'm going to get a lot of, Druze sheikhs hating me for saying that. But, a lot of the rules that they made were based on survival because they saw that this religion was about to be extinct. By the way, like many other religions, minorities in the Middle East.
Jews have the same thing, I think. Like certain laws that just try to keep us intact.
Yeah. People don't talk about it, but as we're speaking today, there is minorities in the Middle East that, and I have it here, actually, it's a very interesting fact that mainstream media is just hiding. Most people don't know about the indigenous minorities in the Middle East, many of whom are nearly erased through centuries of Islamic conquest and persecution. There's the Druze. There is the Samaritans, there is the Armenians, the Maronites, the Assyrians, the Coptics, the Jews. There's so many different minorities in the Middle East that have been in a real threat of being completely erased under Islamic conquest. But yet they keep saying that the Jews are the ones who are trying to genocide. And just shows you how. Yeah, why is, that's easy to reach information. So why is mainstream media keep painting a different picture while the only ones that are actually letting people live peacefully in the Middle East are the Jews? That's very easy. You just need to come and visit.
So the can of worms is here. There's a lot to cover in current events, and I think the main thing that is pretty apparent in what you're talking about is that there's a deeper problem here, which is theological, that animates a lot of the problems in the Middle East, in Israel-Palestine, that most of the West and the commentary completely ignores and just pretends doesn't exist, has this conversation in a vacuum as if radical ideologies and interpretations and theologies are just completely removed from this. And I think what is very apparent in what you're discussing is that why can the Druze just do this? It's that theologically they're not inhibited to see the Jews as kuffar and see the Jews as somebody that can never coexist with, that doesn't have to make everyone submit around them, and therefore that allows for an adaptability to a reality that has been much more beneficial for everyone.
Yeah. I'll give you the best example.
Yeah.
As we're speaking right now, there's an attempted genocide on the Druze minority in Syria, my people.
Yes.
They've killed already more than 1,300, and the numbers keeps going higher and higher. You know, they don't have internet there. They're just going around counting the bodies. They've kidnapped many women. They've raped many of our women. They shaved the mustaches of many of our religious leaders. It is ongoing. On October 7, that didn't have the IDF to stop it. I mean, the IDF came and helped a lot, but, you know, in the end of the day, it is Syrian citizens being killed by the Syrian government. And the only one that stepped in even to come and try to save them is Israel. If it wasn't for Israel, the Druze in Syria would have been annihilated. Why is mainstream media not talking about this? Why are most Americans, when you tell them what's happening in Syria, they only hear that Israel attacked in Syria? They're not hearing about all of this. So to follow your point, something is really off here.
So we have a clip prepared for you to respond to. It even goes further than that, where they're not saying Israel helped the Jews; they're saying Israel caused the Jews to be attacked in the first place.
Michael, before you roll the clip, because I definitely want to get Mansor, I want to get your reaction to this. Just to clarify, I did hear something in interacting with Druze and meeting Druze, when I was in Israel. One of the things they spoke about is that there is something on the topic of theology and the doctrine that Druze have a loyalty to the state that they're in. There's a concept of whatever country that you're under the auspices of, you have to sort of, and you spoke about it with Takia, and sort of having to be like, all right, we have to, you know, have an allegiance, but we don't necessarily support whether we're in Syria. Like there's family members that are split by geography and borders. So can you just highlight that for a minute? Because it just helps clarify like the relationship of Druze to the state that they're in. And then we're going to
Yes, so the Druze do not want to have their own state. And in the religion, they're forbidden from having their own country. They say, you know, having a state leads to politics, leads to corruption, and we are to stay away from that. I personally, and that's, you know, I was a negotiator in the Israeli army for a while for counterterrorism, and I've studied, you know, Islam, Christianity, Judaism in depth, and psychology. Basically, I studied how many psychos are in the Middle East. And you have the theology side and you have the history. History shows that many times small minorities, in order to survive, when you have the Christians crusades and the Muslim crusades just coming and bashing on one another. So they came and said, listen, guys, don't mind us. We're the best citizens you can even have. Our religion tells us that we're not allowed to have our own government, so we're never going to come and, you know, undermine you. Further, we're going to be the best citizens in terms, if you respect us and don't harm us, we're going to pay taxes, we're going to work hard. And anywhere we are, as long as you respect us. So that the Druze in Israel says, you know, Israel is our country. We respect this country. We're going to pay taxes. We're going to work. We're going to abide by the law. Lebanese Druze, Syrian Druze, which makes in some aspect the Druze are the best migrants you can have in your country, because you undoubtedly know that they're not going to try to steal your daughters. They're not trying to convert your people. They're just going to come and live in peace and try to be the best citizens. And in Israel, the Druze are in somewhat like the Jews in the world. They're a very small minority that are overachievers. They are doing so good in every field that they go, in academy, in the army, in politics, in the business spectrum. They're very hospitable. Anyone that comes to them, if you come to a Druze village, you'll see more Israeli flags, along Druze flag than in a Jewish city even. So they are loyal to the land where they are. They don't want to be involved in politics, just want to serve and live peacefully in their land.
And so how does that apply to a Syria pre-Assad, current Assad, and then post-Assad? Like, we're going to roll this clip shortly because I want to get your reaction to it, but just to paint the conditions for Druze under Assad versus post-Assad and what was their, feelings towards what was going on in
their loyalties.
Yeah,
so the Druze under Assad, Assad was evil, but to say, on his behalf, he was equally evil to everyone. So he was oppressing everyone in Syria kind of almost equally. So the Druze were loyal to that country, Syria, and many times they actually rescued and harbored many Muslims and Christians in their mountain to protect them. People have been hearing the name Jaramana. Jaramana is a province of the Druze in Damascus. Jaramana had about 150,000, 200,000 Druze living in it. During the time of Assad killing his own people, Jaramana was relatively a safe place. So many Muslims fled into Jaramana. And it ended up becoming like, I think, 1 million plus Muslims that went there, but then they took over and started, trying to kill and enslave the Druze. But in the beginning, they were living quite peacefully under the Druze in Jaramana because the Druze were just citizens of Syria who were seeing themselves as loyal to this country, and Assad was the enemy of that country in some aspect. So they're trying to defend the people of Syria. When Assad regime fell down, the Druze were the main, because they're very strong and united, were the main forces that helped kick him out of the country. And then they came and appealed to Jawlani and said, now that we got rid of him, let's create a new Syria, a democracy, and let's have in this cabinet Druze, Christians, Alawites, Muslims, Sunnah, and Shia, doesn't matter, a representative of each one. Jawlani, which is a Salafi Muslim, meaning the extremist of the Muslims. For those who don't know, Salafis, they take the Islam to the extreme of the extreme, and there's a lot of room to go extreme there. And they don't have a place for minorities. So they kicked, basically the Druze out. And then they started demanding that the Druze and the Christians and the Alawite, lay down their weapons. Meanwhile, they were arming ISIS and Al-Qaeda, jihadis, and bringing even foreign fighters. So you can understand why the Druze and the Christians, the Alawites, were not very reluctant to come and say, okay, wait, hold down. You don't want us to be in the government. You want us to give you all your weapons. You're giving weapons and money to ISIS and Al-Qaeda who are sieging our towns, kidnapping our daughters. We're not going to give you a weapon, dude. Chill back. Let's create, a better. So it actually brought that the moderate Muslims in Syria were starting to support the Druze call. And they even rallied behind al-Hijri, which is, the main sheikh of Syria. They said he's the only one that is actually trying to give a real solution for the future of Syria. But as we see now, Syria was kidnapped from the hands of Assad. Jawlani did not take Syria by democracy. He basically took it by force. And they created a very jihadist Syria, which pushed away minorities like Druze, Christians, and Alawites to fight for their life. And many of them even ran to hide under the Druze in the Druze mountains. And that's kind of, to answer your question.
And this was is what's happening now currently under the direction of Jawlani, or are these random Bedouin tribes and groups doing it?
So Jawlani is trying to say that it's not under his direction because he's getting money from the West, and the West is trying to rebrand him. They made him look like a hipster, and now
a handsome guy. That's what they're calling him.
Yeah, very, very strong guy. I love your imitations, man. Thank you. So Jawlani is trying to back off, but we see that his soldiers are the ones committing these atrocities. His tanks rolled inside of a Druze village, killed and butchered people. His religious leaders and generals gave instructions to kill all the Druze. So either Jawlani completely doesn't control Syria, or as many of the Druze and the Christians are saying, he haven't changed his face. He is still ISIS. He does. He is still exact same ISIS. He only knows that he can fool Europe and America, and they're going to give him money.
So let's pause right there, Michael. Just roll the clips. These two back to back. They're in the same segment, and I just want to get your reaction in light of everything we've been saying.
And I don't believe for a second that they are defending the Druze in Syria. I mean, to me, it seems, especially, think about the conversation you were just having. We're supposed to believe now that the Israelis are just so, I saw, who was it? It was one of the neocons I saw tweeting the other day, goes, I've just seen the footage of the Druze being killed, and it's just heartbreaking to see. Like, we're really supposed to believe that that's what's motivating them, yet we've seen 1,000 times more footage coming right next door in Gaza, and that hasn't motivated them to stop. But the crazy thing, as you pointed out, that I've been tagged by so many of these Israel defenders is that, look, I hate the term whataboutism. I hate when people use it. I think it gets used incorrectly, and it gets used to stifle people putting things into context often. But this, first of all, really does seem like an example of just being like, well, you're concerned with the people dying here. How come you're not talking about the people dying there, which is not a legitimate defense? It would be like telling someone to stop doing archaeology because we need, what about cancer research? Well, okay, we can all specialize and focus on different things. But specifically in the case of Syria, it's so outrageous because, as you well know, Pierce, I mean, it was for many years, going all the way back to 2011, it was the policy of Israel, the United States of America, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey to attempt to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. And they had a years-long campaign. I mean, the Saudis sent suicide bombers in. The United States of America poured billions of dollars into the conflict, well past the point where they knew it was getting into the hands of ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and they lied about the moderate rebels. But even Barack Obama at the time had admitted that the idea that there was some moderate rebel fighting force that was going to get in between Bashar al-Assad's army and ISIS and conquer both of them was ridiculous. Now, as you know the history, Russia came in, Putin intervened, and kind of prevented that regime change for a while, and then ultimately they got it. But
it's the same position that no, and not only that, Israel's responsible for the chaos now in supporting the toppling of Assad, and same with all the Western powers that were involved. So I'd love to hear your reaction to that over basically accountability. Is Israel, first of all, as you said, trying to defend some of the Druze in Syria, and are they even, as far as he's claiming, responsible for the current conditions of the genocide going on there?
Let's call it for what it is. Dave Smith have never been to the Middle East. I'm born in the Middle East. I'm an Arab, born and raised in the Middle East. I have relatives in Syria. I'm talking to them on a daily basis. I was in the Special Forces. I was behind enemy lines, and I was in the defense inside of Israel. I think I know a little bit more than Dave Smith about what's happening in Syria. And I mentioned how he went mumbling all around the place and not answering the one simple question. An army of jihadists sponsored by the government with but 70 Bedouin tribes came from all over the Middle East and called a jihad and a fatwa, which is an executive order that you're allowed to kill the Druze and kidnap their women and daughters as sex slaves. And they went and did that, including fighters from Chechnya, from Lebanon, from Iraq, from all over the Middle East and Syria, bringing their tanks and their artillery inside of Druze villages, using Druze as human shields, killing Druze and Christians alike in that mountain, burning them, walking with beheaded heads of Druze people with glee in their eyes, same like we saw with Hamas, shooting their babies, raping their women, shaving the mustache of their religious people, just like we saw in the Holocaust. All of this happened on steroids to the smallest minority almost on the face of this earth. The only one that stepped to defend them and save them is Israel. I'm hearing that from people in Syria. There's literally videos of Israeli Apache pilots going and taking down these Muslimbis, I call them, the Muslim zombies, jihadist extremists, coming and raging and trying to kill everything in their way. Israel saved them. Israel sent humanitarian aid. Israel doesn't owe the Druze in Syria nothing. I'm saying that as a Druze. They're not citizens. They're citizens of another country, an enemy country of Israel that is coming to kill its own people. And Israel did that because that's the right thing to do, because that's what the Jewish people are called also in some aspects, some might say, to be a light to the nations. And they came and said, we're not going to let you exterminate these people. So with that happening, Israel is not trying to conquer Syria. Israel is already engaged. I was an officer in the army. I know how these things work. Israel is engaged for more than 650 days in a war about 7 fronts. Our soldiers are tired. Our economy is feeling the burden, and we're still fighting to protect Israel. We went to one of the biggest wars in the history of this country against Iran. Can you imagine how many logistics and how much the army needs to put into putting that? And now on top of that, Israel is going out of their way to defend minorities in an enemy country from the country trying to kill them. And then come Dave Smith and try to make it look like Israel is the bad guy while saving minorities in the Middle East. So what can Israel do to stop being called the bad guys? Seriously.
Well, I guess just to separate the message from the messenger, this critique about. Obviously, I agree about the characterization that the only actors in the region are Israel, the only ones are the United States. And it's funny because he's like, what about the accountability agency of all the jihadists coming down and slaughtering them, as if they just can't help themselves? How you knew this would happen is so that they would just come down and start slaughtering people. I'm not offended by the slaughter. I'm offended that you just let that happen, as if they just have no agency. That was my critique.
He didn't mention that once.
The message about reckless intervention or supporting a toppling of a regime of Assad. Is there any credibility to that, where it's like you said, Assad is an equal opportunity evil person, but there's a stability with these horrible dictators that keep everything in check, and now there's this power vacuum. Did Israel not anticipate this reality? Even if they're trying to make up for it now, I'm not saying they're at fault, but in reacting to it, what accountability or agency do they have in that power vacuum that's created? Yeah,
and also what geopolitical interest do they have in Assad falling? How was it beneficial for Israel for Assad to fall? I don't understand, so I'm asking.
That's a very good question. And let me give you my 5 cents coming from a strategic army military perspective. For many, many years, Syria was the biggest enemy of Israel. My training during, when I was in the Special Forces in the IDF, we'd use a lot of demos like, a bunch of a Syrian platoon is coming, charge, etc., etc. Like the word Syrian, Oyev Suri Mechupar, a Syrian enemy in the trenches, do maneuvering, etc. So it was all based on almost on fighting the Syrians, because that was one of the main enemies that Israel had for many years. Syria was so paranoid. I'm giving you the big picture, and it's going to answer your question. Syria was so paranoid of the Israeli Air Force that Syria had the biggest number of anti-aircraft missiles in the world per size, per square meter, backed by Russia and other foreign agencies, because they wanted to stop the Israeli IDF, because they knew that Israel's IDF, they can't really fight against it. When the Assad regime was falling, Israel used that to take down the entire air defense of Syria in about 2 days. It was considered one of the biggest airstrikes, attacks in the history of planet Earth. Now, let's run a little bit forward. What happened next? Iran is trying to build a nuclear bomb. The clock is ticking. Israel knew that they need to take that threat away. We can't allow Iran to use a nuke against Israel. There's only one Jewish state on the face of this earth. We can't allow them to come and genocide them all, as they keep saying all the time. So when Israel went and attacked Iran in the most brilliant military operation ever, probably in the history of mankind, it's quite safe to say, they had a complete, air corridor without a single anti-aircraft Assad regime missile to come and bother them. That way they can go fuel over, keep flying over. That's very far away, Iran, from us. So Israel had a very good interest with the fall of that regime and destroying its army. It's an enemy country. Undoubtedly, that's an enemy country. Want to destroy you, standing, as a buffer zone. By the way, Iran was sponsoring the Assad regime in Syria. That's why many Syrians hate Iran as well, because they were oppressing the people in Syria, because they basically took control over Syria. Assad was their puppet. So Israel cleared that threat. Now, Israel did not go and fight against Assad. Israel did not go and, topple him. That was something that happened by default, because Israel was just kicking ass. They stopped holding their punches after October 7, and they took down Hezbollah with the pagers. They were crushing Hamas. They started fighting with the Houthis, all the terrorist organizations. They weakened Iran so much in the first round when they took down all their air defenses. So with that, when Iran was so busy surviving, Hezbollah is completely dismantled, which was the main strongest military force in the Middle East. Hezbollah, as a terrorist organization, was stronger than many countries around the world. In terms of the military capability and training that they had, it was the most skilled and dangerous terrorist organization on the face of this planet.
And so they were aligned with Assad and Iran, just like a Hezbollah.
Yes,
Iran,
Hezbollah
Assad,
was defending Assad. Yeah,
and Jolani and what's happening now. These are they Sunni ISIS Al Qaeda?
Exactly. Jolani and his guys hate Hezbollah and hate Iran, because they are the other radicals, not the Shia, the Sunni radicals, who were being oppressed by Hezbollah, who was killing them, and etc. So they were very happy when Israel weakened all the enemy, and they jumped and they went with a blitzkrieg and took over the momentum and took down. Now, all of them admitted that they would have not been able, with the help of Turkey and others, they would have not been able to do that if Israel was not such a badass in the Middle East and just went out and just beat the crap out of all the bad guys. And now the other weak bad guys suddenly had an opportunity, and Turkey backed them up and they went. So if there's anyone that is actually directly involved in toppling the regime of Bashar al-Assad and putting Jolani, is Turkey. They went in full on with their weapons, their drones, their people, and helped take. But it all happened thanks to Israel working, like playing the 3D chess. While everybody's kind of, funking goats in the Middle East, Israel is playing 3D chess, kind of a few steps ahead. They thought, how can we defeat Iran and stop them from nuking Israel and killing all the Israelis, Jews, Christians, Arab, Jews, doesn't matter what. So in that way, Syria was on the way. Assad fell down, his army was taken over, and then these guys went and took out Israel. They had no incentive of Jolani. The last thing that Israel want is an Al-Qaeda ISIS, to replace Assad with ISIS. They don't want
So the day after plan, because everyone talks about Gaza, everyone talks about Israel, obviously having taken out Hamas, so there's a parallel there of like the day after plan. I'm sure there's calculations. They know of these forces in a power vacuum that could come up in that struggle. So what what do they do? Is it like a one day at a time, case by case? We deal with whichever enemy is in front of us. I find it interesting the way you presented it, because oftentimes it's presented as like Israel backed these things. It's like, no, Israel's acting in its interest to protect itself. And yes, power vacuums get created. That's a very different way of framing it than the way the Dave Smiths of the world, or people say Israel's just out there, trying to topple these regimes. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, it's very like anti-Semitic in nature, of like they have control over every single element of the world at every time, and everything they do, they know how it will work and they know how it will cascade, and they're responsible for it.
Yeah, and everything that happens is just conveniently according to plan.
Right.
According to plan, and people who've never been to the Middle East, they love to say these things because it's cool, and it brings a lot of people to watch it, but they have no idea what they're talking about.
Just to get to the day after, I mean, Israel is aware of these risks that happen when you topple, these regimes that have been in power for a long time, keeping things at bay, and then all of a sudden, in that power vacuum, things flood in, like what's happening now. So take us to the here and now, because it's clearly, to say it's not optimal, to say it's better than before, but would be such an understatement of what's happening. Is a disaster in its own right. What is Israel's response? What's the appropriate response? How to contend with the current issues?
Here's the thing: people like to think that whenever you take an evil dictator, everything's going to be fine because everybody under him are just victims and they just want peace. Now, the reality is usually an evil dictator was not the only evil person in that country. In Syria, there was mass graves of hundreds of thousands of people buried. Do you think Bashar al-Assad went with a shovel and put them all in? It was like a lot of the Syrians came and did that. So there were a lot of people there that share these jihadist views, including with the ISIS and Al-Qaeda. So when Israel or America comes and tries to take one bad guy, to come and expect them to come and completely babysit this whole country and make sure that now they're going to have proper democracy, everything, and it's going to become Switzerland, is very naive and even stupid to think that. So Israel knew that there's one evil guy, Assad. He's out of the way. Great. Now we take down his army. Now we take down Iranian regime, nuclear capabilities. In that vacuum that was created, you see one of the first things that Israel came and sent Jolani, and it created some kind of a vacuum in the area of the south of Syria. It told him, Jolani, we don't trust you. We didn't want you to take Syria, but you took it. Hands off the Druze, and you can't come south from Damascus. Why? Because they knew that Jolani's forces are ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and Israel doesn't want them at the border. So that's why Jolani was unable to send his tanks and his army to south of Damascus, which happened to be also where many of the minorities fled, because they knew that's the only way that he cannot come and slaughter them, because Israel won't allow him. So in that crazy Jurassic Park, jihadist park kind of the Middle East, Israel is trying to protect itself, knowing what's happening around the fence, and is trying to survive and think ahead, but it's not trying to babysit these countries and to make them a better place. It is in the interest of Israel that these countries become a better place, but look what's happening with Palestine. We've been trying to do that for so many years and nothing is happening. It's not that easy to change Muslim Brotherhood jihadist mentality. They don't become Dubai in a day. They don't become Saudi Arabia in a day. It needs to come from within them. So to come and blame Israel that a shithole is still a shithole, just because someone flushed the toilet kind of once, it's kind of stupid. So that's why I think like people who talk like Dave Smith and others, and it's very sad that he's been invited to Joe Rogan and Piers Morgan, and they talk to someone who's never been to the Middle East. They haven't invited a single Druze, by the way, to come and talk on these shows. I haven't seen CNN talk to a single Druze. I've seen them talking to all kind of weird professors from all around the world that are clear anti-Semitics, and they're always trying to paint Israel as the bad guy. They're not talking to a real Druze or a real Israeli from that region.
Right. So I want to ask about that because it's so interesting and it's just really concerning and horrible to see, because I've seen things I can't unsee when it comes to footage going on in Syria, what's happening to the Druze communities there, as you see people with religious fervor and elation filming proudly what's going on, these kinds of atrocities. They're so explicit, and one hates to compare suffering and tragedy in one area to another, but you don't see the same kind of comparable types of things, even though you see the destruction and tragedy of war in Gaza. You see aftermath of things, and a lot of it I think is Hamas propaganda, but you also just see flat out people suffering. It has a very different quality and character to what you see coming out of Syria when it comes to the Druze being lined up on top of I don't have to tell you, it's just the footage of October 7th on steroids. It has a very different quality and a very different character to it. In terms of the intention, the purpose, the willful genociding of these people. The media absence, silence, apathy towards it. I'm curious because you're saying they don't have these people on. Like, what's your reaction to that? Go ahead, Mike.
Just to make a little more clear, specifically, if we can call it Arab on Arab violence, seems to be dismissed as sectarian and natural to how these people just kind of live. Arab on Jew violence also seems to be a natural thing that doesn't need our attention. But Jew on Arab violence is genocide. That needs all of our attention.
That's what it appears. Michael's not saying that the sectarian nature of these things, the way it's covered,
it's 100%.
The way it's covered, it's covered.
It's 100%, and we don't need to even be politically correct to kind of unveil that, because we always people say no Jews, no news. I add to that, it's not no Jews, no news. It's anything that make the Muslim look bad, no news. And in that case, right now, the Jews are the front line, but now the Druze are joining the same thing. I just finished, and I'll come back to your question, but I'm here in Zurich, and I just grabbed an Uber back to the hotel with my kid. And as I was standing, waiting for the taxi, there were two Arab taxi drivers that were talking Arabic. And I heard them say the word Druze. So I came close by, and I speak fluent Arabic. I'm an Arab from the Middle East. And they were saying that Jawlani should finish the Druze, slaughter them all. And the other one came and said, yes, if I'll see a Druze, I'll just shove him up in my trunk and I'll make him disappear. That's in Europe. Now, in Zurich, every second street...
And you're like, I'm going to Uber.
Yeah, exactly. Every second corner here is like a Free Palestine graffiti on the wall in Gaza. And then my taxi driver comes, and he's also a Muslim, and he starts talking to these guys like he's our best friends. Hey, ya habibi, ya ammi, hey, we'll sharami to Druze, and start cursing them. Now, I'm a Druze. I'm an Israeli. I'm with my kid. Now, my kid, he talks to me in Hebrew. He calls me Abba. He says shalom to people. Now, I don't want that taxi driver with his jihadist friends in Europe to know that I'm a Druze from Israel while they just said they want to slaughter all the Jews. And my kid, he's not the best co-pilot for espionage agencies behind enemy line. He's going to completely throw me under the bus. Yeah. So I made a game with him, and it's funny, but it's sad. I told him, his name is Rafael. I told him, Rafi, let's play a game, a competition. Who can be more quiet until we reach the hotel? If Abba wins, I get an ice cream. If you win, you get an ice cream. He was so happy. He remained quiet the entire ride, just so he doesn't call me once Abba or say a word like shalom. So Europe became unsafe.
Zurich.
This is in Zurich. This is today. Europe have became unsafe for Jews, and now it became unsafe for Druze, and it's unsafe because there's radical Muslims who want to come and kill us, and no one likes to talk about it. Now, back to your questions. I used to be an officer in the IDF, and I took many missions in Gaza, by the way. And, it's normal when your soldiers hate the enemy. That's normal. Soldiers in your country are not supposed to love the enemies. But whenever we went to missions in Gaza, I remember specifically, the Shabak will come and tell us, listen, we need to go and take down this terrorist. Now, we had 4 hours to prepare for this operation. I had colleagues of mine in the Special Forces in the UK and Europe. They told me that we would work for 3 months preparing for one mission like this. We'd do like 2 a day. That's how trained is Israel because of what we're dealing with. So now 4 hours to prepare for a mission behind enemy line. I run immediately. My soldiers are sleeping. I run immediately to the intelligence officer. I get the maps. I come and tell him, show me the maps. Show me exactly right now where are schools and where are hospitals and where are civilian people. And he marks it for me. I run back to my radio man and the camera and the navigation guy. I said, okay, listen, make sure for the briefing, I want to make sure that everybody knows where these areas. And then I wake up my soldiers and we're getting the gear ready. We're about to go behind enemy line in a very dangerous place. And I would say 50% of my briefing to my soldiers is telling them, if you get shot from here, you can't shoot back. If you get shot from here, you can't shoot back because you end up hitting children. Now, here's another thing. I'm in charge of the operation. I'm in charge of the tank force that is going to come with us as a coverage, the tanks and the D9s. The tank have a very, very unique, cool system, the IDF. It's not a secret anymore. If you laser at one of these tanks, the tank commander with his crew of 3, so there are 4 in the tank, will see that someone is about to shoot a missile at them. There's a laser pointing at them. It's going to be blinking, and he can press the button, and immediately the turret will turn directly into the direction of that RPG or laser guided RPG. You don't use a laser guided missile, and then that tank commander have a split of a second to press the button and shoot, take down that enemy, or allow him to burn alive the entire crew. Now, what did the Palestinians did? Not once, not twice, so many times. They'll gather children, give them candies, bring them around, and then one of these jihadists, dressed like a civilian, will pull up one of these launchers, laser the tank. Now it's a win-win because if Israel shoots at him and all the children are dead. One jihadist, 10 kids are dead. Very bad for publicity. It's going to help promote the Palestinian agenda. If they don't do it, now an entire crew of Israeli tank crew is burned alive. So just imagine how difficult it is to fight in Gaza. Now bring it today, they got tunnels everywhere. They're coming out of tunnels. They're aiming at us, these launchers. Our soldiers need to be ready to fight front, back, under the ground, from above. You're walking in the street. Suddenly people start opening fire at you. Someone comes from a tunnel, starts shooting at you. Your friend just got a missile. He's completely blown away. I have friends who, that's the story that they share. Someone just got shot. You're pulling him out. You're running. You break a door to go in. Another terrorist in the door. You take him down while you're pulling your friend in. Now they're shooting at you all from the building. You have wounded soldiers on the floor. Now, what do? You call for airstrike to come and save you. Now, it's a responsibility of Israel, any country, America, any country who's at war, to bring back their boys alive. So Israel's going to come and look, where is this happening? He's going to tell them it's happening from this building. They're shooting. They come, a launch, a missile goes, boom, the building goes away. Israel helps evacuate them, get out of alive. They bring back, their wounded people, which, by the way, is only Israel in that war is doing that. I've never seen a jihadist go to rescue a wounded jihadist. Never. And I fought them many times. Actually, it's quite crazy, and it's, I don't want to say funny, but part of their military tactic, it's called istashhid and Allahu Akbar. Now, people don't understand that. When you see jihadists going around shooting above their head like amateurs, shouting Allahu Akbar, it's not just because they're amateurs, don't know how to fight. They're afraid of getting their head blown off, but also they believe that when they say Allahu Akbar, it's going to guide their bullets, and that's how they're going to go. So they, Allahu Akbar, they shoot and they believe. So there's some religious aspect. Istashhid, from the word shaheed, means when one of them get injured, his friends will not come and rescue him. They will tell him istashhid, mean become shaheed, give your life, and then we'll come take ammunition and run. So they're not focused on rescuing each other. Israel is. So when Israel comes and tries to rescue their people through this, mayhem that is going, and they have civilians hiding in these buildings, then yes, civilians are going to die, because that's what happened when you come and fight a terrorist organization hiding in civilian population. But mainstream media doesn't talk about it. Dave Smith have no clue about these things because they haven't been there. They haven't seen it. Anyone, if you talk to many American veterans that came from Iraq, from Afghanistan, they'll tell you, yeah, we've seen that, man. We've seen that. But when he was in Idaho, running after butterflies in the field, I don't know what, as a young guy who grew up in America, a great country, he probably didn't experience that kind of evil and wickedness, so he doesn't know. So it's easy for him to come and judge, oh, there's so many dead civilians in Gaza. Of course there's, and it's terrible. It's terrible.
But
I wish there weren't.
You give a lot more texture and reality to the talking point of human shields, because you see, the spokespeople for Israel going out and saying they're using human shields. But if you just say a talking point long enough without providing the texture that you just did, I think it falls on deaf ears. And I just want to take the reality you just painted versus when you see images coming out of Gaza, when you see the destruction that someone who isn't aware of such things is seeing, rubble, destruction, we will never forgive Israel for this. Can you just tell us, perception-wise, what you see as someone who knows what that looks like in real life and how that translates for you when you see the depictions, and how much of it is Pallywood, propaganda, reality, necessary, unnecessary, military mistakes, calculations, or just the reality of such things? Because we could talk about it all day in headline warfare, but as someone who sees it, what do you see?
So what I told you now, the jihadists in Gaza know that as well. And what they know, that if they will get more of their children killed, mainstream media will jump to defend them. They count on that. And world politicians, either they're woke or bought by Arabian money, will jump in to defend them. So their survival tactic is literally built on increasing the number of civilian casualties. Now, when it comes to modern warfare, that is the hardest kind of warfare, because now you're not going to fight a brave enemy that's going to face you face to face. Israel, when they deal with an enemy that is, not behaving like this, they destroy them in like days, hours sometimes. Look how fast it was to take down Hezbollah in Iran. In Hamas in Gaza, that's part of their strategy. That's why they're not allowing civilians to run away. That's why when you're walking in these, tunnels or these neighborhoods, every second house is booby trapped. They have snipers in every, cornered. They have machine guns. They have children running with guns. So if you don't take that kid right now, he's going to take you. They have kids running with, vests. I once heard, Dave Smith, and I think that helps you understand that reality. He was talking about checkpoints.
Mhm.
We brought him in. So let's talk. I grew up in Israel when there was no checkpoints. My father used to take me to Gaza. I used to come back from Gaza. I used to go to Ramallah to eat knafa baklawa. They used to come to Israel to work. And then one day we started having Intifada revolution and people blowing themselves and many Israelis dead. And then Israelis didn't start to stop it, but they couldn't. On a weekly basis, there were like bodies on trees, and Kadisha was going around pulling, the blood. It was terrible, unbearable. So Israel started checking military-age men with random checkpoints. And then they started using women. So Israel started checking women. And then they started using pregnant women or looking pregnant. They will come in, soldier will help them. She'll shout, Allahu Akbar, kill the soldier with her. So Israel started checking pregnant women. And then Israel said, enough is enough. They start building a fence. And then they start sending children. I've seen with my own eyes a child coming with a school backpack that had a bomb in it and a timer to operate it with a phone from far away. And Israel saw that the kid was very, very scared. Now, every action got a reaction. We didn't start with a checkpoint. It was literally in a way to stop the jihadists, but you keep abusing every weakness that you have in a humanitarian society, they will abuse it. So now Israel is clearing the area, having this electronic umbrella to stop the phone signal from operating, while the jihadists actually trying to call that kid to blow him. And they send a demolition robot, this kind of bomb squad robot, to go and take the backpack from the kid. Now, the mainstream media films the robot. They have a shotgun. Oh my God, poor Palestinian kids. Israelis as genociding, killing Palestinian children. And Israel saved that kid, took him to a social worker. I saw it with my own eyes. Social worker came, was called, bring a social worker here. We have a child. They went, they took him, they hugged him, they gave him water. They don't
like
talk
half
about
of
that.
70% of the Israeli population are social workers, right? From what I understand.
Yes, my sister is a social worker.
There you go. So there wasn't a shortage. But
So
you've seen it with your own eyes. That's the thing.
I've seen it with my own, and that's in every action got a reaction, and they like to jump. They see a picture now. Checkpoint is bad. Children dead is bad. Of course it's bad. Checkpoint is not a picnic. It's not a great thing, but there's a need for it. Israel fighting in Gaza to bring back the hostages, there's a need for it.
And bringing it to the here and now, I mean, in terms of optics, right? The big stories being covered are these, and we're getting into the weeds here, which I actually didn't expect to go, but it's interesting because you've seen a lot of this firsthand. Humanitarian aid sites, you see some clip, you hear bullets in the air, and then a narrative is painted. Israel fires upon innocent Gazans seeking food, as if they're rounding them up in these lanes and luring them in with food. So aside from the combat areas, when you see these humanitarian aid sites and then you see the narrative that's being spun, what do you see in that scenario?
What I see in that scenario is the only country that I've known, at least in the history of warfare, that is doing its best to feed the enemy country that came to kill them, and having this humanitarian aid stolen again and again by Hamas to starve its people, and then Israel gets all the heat for that. Now let's talk about, they say that we want to kill Palestinians. You know how easy it is for Israel to kill Palestinians? If Israel wanted to kill the Palestinians, you know how easy that would be for Israel. They have no way to stop it. So that is, a silly claim. Now, you know how much food have entered Gaza? So much food. And the people are still starving because Hamas is stopping it. Now, I'm not saying they're not hungry. Yes, Hamas is stealing that food. If Hamas would have stopped stealing the food, America and Israel will be able to feed all of the Gazans. Now, no one is talking about the famine that is happening in Yemen, in Sudan, in many other countries. There's real starvation there by the Muslims on the Christians or on their own self. No one is talking about that, but Israel is trying its best to feed the enemy country that came and invaded her, or city. And then Israel gets all the heat for that. Now, I know it because I was in the army. I remember myself giving food to Palestinians. I remember one time a little Palestinian girl that came sneaking into my base. I got woken up in the morning, and there were constant threats that were given to us by the Shabak that they were planning to come and do a big terrorist attack on my outposts. The plan was to actually come with a jeep from inside of Israel, cross, open the back trunk. They had big machine guns and start shooting all of us and killing my soldiers. So we were ready for that kind of scenario. And in the morning after, while we're ready for some big attack, we see someone crawling next to the gate. My soldier wake me up. I go, we open in the corner. I see it's a girl. I call her to stop down, and I see she's actually trying to get food. So I speak to her Arabic. She looked like my sister. And I told her that's the last time. And I knew who was her father, by the way. He was an older Palestinian man that was probably too proud to come and ask for food from the Zionists. But also he lived too far away to go to work in Palestine, and the Palestinians were stealing their own food, so he got stuck. So I saw him from far away. I didn't call him, because if I would call him, they'll call him a traitor, and they might even kill him for that. I just nodded to him, and I told that girl that's the last time in Arabic that you come looking for food here. We're going to give you food from now on. And for about 3 months, we fed that entire family. Did anyone talk about that? My soldiers even came and told me, listen, we know the values that you try to bring to us, and we love you, Mansor, and we will go with you to the gates of hell and back. But you're giving food to people that will see us slaughtered if they had the chance. Mm-hmm. And I came and I told them, listen, guys, this is exactly our hope for one day having peace here, by great act of kindness, despite the situation, to keep showing them that we're not like them, to keep showing them that we don't hate them, that we just don't want them to kill us. So that is the IDF that I know. I was an officer in that. I trained soldiers, generations of them. That is the IDF that I know. But that's not the IDF that you get in the pictures outside. They're trying to portray us as baby killers by people who don't know or are deliberately lying. And that's what's pissing me off. I have a lot of friends of mine that came and told me, why do you keep saying that you're from the IDF? You're living abroad. You're putting yourself at risk. And somewhat, yes. I mean, I don't know if I can travel to Canada anymore or the UK if I get arrested if I go there. I've said so many times that I was in the Israeli Special Forces, but someone needs to come and say it, because no one is defending us. No one is defending the Druze, by the way, as well. The only ones standing for the Druze are the Jews.
Mm-hmm. So as an Arab whose family, correct me if I'm wrong, has been in Israel for a very, very long time, that even pre-exists the state of Israel, someone who understands what we're dealing with in Syria and Gaza, what advice would you give to the state of Israel on how to sort of end this war, or how to win this war over the next little while, for someone who might be coming from a different place of understanding?
Yeah. Well, a lot of people might not like this answer, but that's because they have no clue what the Middle East is. In the Middle East, the only language you need to know is power and respect. If you don't have power, you're not respected. If you're not respected, you're slaughtered. When you show power, people start following suit and start, that's what you see in all these Arab countries as well. When the dictatorship leaves, it becomes, mayhem, because it was a strong dictator. He was evil, but he was strong. So the way that the West perceives strength is by negotiation, by talking, by making compromise. In the Arab world, if you make a compromise, if you even open for negotiations, it's only because you're weak. Because if you weren't, you will take it. You will take that land, you'll kill these people, you won't even negotiate with them. So Israel now, after October 7th, started to behave as if they understand the language of the Arab men. They're not talking sushi anymore, they're talking Arabic. And I think that's very important, that they keep showing that they're strong and that they're not playing game, and they start behaving like a regional power. We are the ones who dictate how things are going to happen here. We're not going to let minorities be slaughtered. We're not going to let October 7 happen. We're not going to let organizations like Hamas raise an entire generation of children to become jihadists. We're going to dictate. Now, the West is going to resist that, because there's a lot of woke there, and there's a lot of political involvement that is trying to push different directions, and there's a lot of also Sunnah and Shia money that is trying to push universities and etc. to make them hate Israel. But Israel have to stand its ground and keep standing strong, because the deterrence in the Middle East is one of the most important ways to avoid bloodshed. One of the things that they teach you actually on SWAT, when you want to come and take down, house full of terrorists and not hurt the hostages, they say maximum power through maximum entrances through minimal time. You want to bring as much power as you can through as much entrances as you can, from the ground, from the walls, from the windows, from the ventilation system, in minimal time. So when you come with a lot of power, you end up using less power, because the enemy will surrender immediately, or you take him fast. If you come and send just one James Bond going in, or Jason Bourne, it's going to become a bloodbath, because you just went unprepared. So a lot of time, by showing a lot of strength, you end up actually having to use way less strength. And Israel should keep showing strength.
That actually demonstrates, that example of SWAT, I think demonstrates very clearly the difference between how Israel has approached Gaza versus how they approached Hezbollah and Iran. And it seems like 18, 20 months later of dragging things out, sending one thing at a time into Gaza, one James Bond into Gaza at a time, has prolong the bloodshed and the suffering, as opposed to maximum strength while not actually needing to use it, but maximum deterrence.
Exactly.
And how do you apply that strategically as a critique from someone who wants Israel to be victorious, but as a critique to say, look what happens if you're prioritizing your image in the world over your security, or not being able to operate on those terms that you're describing in that way of showing power and gaining respect.
Yeah,
that
you're gonna end
accurate
up
to say
having.
as a critique?
Yeah, no, that was very accurate, because you end up having more bloodshed if you don't come and show as much strength as you can from the start. Because when you show it from the start, people back up. Like, okay, we don't want to fight. Okay, this is bad. Look what they've done here and here. Israel's not playing games. But when you come and do it step by step, they take it as a weakness, and also they know that they can lure you into this ongoing bloodshed and get the West to kind of stop you, so you would never actually win the war, and you would keep them in power. So Israel should start from the beginning. I think every war against jihad should go with maximum power from the beginning. And when you've done it once, twice, 3 times, the memo will go. They will start saying, okay, shit, we don't mess with America anymore. We don't mess with the Israelis. These guys are crazy. Let's not do this. It's not working.
The latest in the headlines is the calls for a Palestinian state by France, saying they're going to do it at the UN. Michael, have you seen that too, with the head of the UK also saying, I will recognize it, and all that kind of stuff? I'm curious. I did read an article in Wall Street Journal about paramilitary groups forming in Gaza to fight Hamas. So I'm curious, are you encouraged by that? I know that there's this delusional talk about wishful thinking of 2 states that could exist, hypothetically, conceptually, but I'm curious if you see any encouragement in the Gazan side of things of building coalitions against Hamas to possibly have an alternative reality in the future of what could happen with the population. Is there anything, that little girl that you talked about, like, to what extent can we project that onto the population? How much of it is Hamas? How much of it support Hamas, but maybe want a different version of it? Or they still are hostile to Israel? Like, what's wishful thinking and what's reality?
I think they're still hostile to Israel. They're not our friends. They grew up in a very different mentality and religion that want to see Israel killed. They're just enemies of Hamas. And the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That's, something that's been, a song that we heard many, many times in the past. You want to empower sometimes the enemy of your enemies to take down that enemy. But the problem with Palestine and with the Muslim Brotherhood there specifically is that doesn't matter what you do, they still want to convert you or kill you. So if it's Hamas, if it's Fatah, when people are being raised from a young age to think that their religion is the only way, and that they need to come and take you and kill you or convert you, you never have peace with them. You can never have, because if not today, something's going to happen tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. And that mentality needs to change in the Muslim world for that to work. We're seeing kind of, hopes of change in places like the Emirates, like Saudi Arabia in some aspects. I still don't fully trust them, to be honest, but I think they're going in the right way, because no one is afraid in Switzerland that Denmark is going to invade them right now and force them to bake bread the way they want to bake bread, or I don't know what, yodel the way they want to yodel, or they're going to kill them all, because it just doesn't exist here. There's not a single thing. In the West, we completely abandoned that need, that desire to go and convert other countries and make them like us. We actually enjoy that when we go to Japan, it's completely different. That when we go to Finland, it's completely different. We enjoy that diversity. With radical Islam and even mainstream Islam in many places in the world, they still have that desire that they want to convert you, because they believe that Sharia law is the ultimate way that humanity should live on. So anyone that believes that Sharia law is the ultimate way, it's going to be very hard to have a real lasting peace with that person. Now, many people will not like to hear it because I'm generalizing in big picture. I have amazing Muslim friends. Some of my best friends are Muslims. But still, if he believes that I should live in Sharia law, then I have a problem with that, buddy. I have no
But
problem.
your
how you
friends,
play.
you said you have the amazing Muslim friends that you do have, do they disregard that belief? Is that just something, it's theoretical, conceptual, but I don't take it that seriously?
So they became a bit more Westerner in some aspects. They're still Muslim, they pray and etc., but they're not trying actively to change the West. My only problem that I have with them, and we talk about it sometimes, is what happens if another Muslim comes and he want to change? Are you going to stand, be a hodor, hold the door, not let him go? Or are you going to come and tell him, tfaddal, after all, Sharia law, of course, it's the way of Allah. So that is the problem, as how many of them actually really adapted and accepted your way and are willing to live with coexistence. That's number one. And how many of them are actually going to stand against anyone that's going to come try to, destroy your way of life? So a lot of my Muslim friends, I would say not all of them completely adapted coexistence. I know that some of them, if these things will happen, will just try to stay out of it, but they will not fully stand against it. And that's a problem.
And it's an internal problem too, because we can understand, I mean, coming from the Jewish community, that the religious Jewish community, there are, it's not on this kind of level, but just the idea of things being theological, things being within a doctrine, that it's hard to, those are much more immovable things. They're not comparable to what these ideas are, but just the concept of having to adapt to modernity is a push and pull. So I definitely understand that tension, but it's definitely something internal. We're coming up on the time here. I just want to get back to, and you did mention about Abraham Accords potentially in other states that could potentially see a pathway forward. You don't become the Emirates overnight, but maybe eventually you do. So I'm encouraged to hear that a little bit. But yes, you're cautiously optimistic, it sounds like. But back to what's going on, just as to what brought us to have this conversation. What is the current state this moment, and what are you hearing from Druze in Syria, the condition there, the status? Is Israel planning on doing more? Do they have to pull away because of pressure? What's the current status
So
of
the current
Druze
status,
community there?
Yeah, after the massacre that happened by the Syrian government and their proxies, tens of thousands of houses have been burned, villages have been completely burned, their food supplies have been damaged, poisoned, the water wells, and etc. There's a real famine and starvation that is happening there as we speak. The convoys of food that are trying to reach the mountain are being stopped often by these, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, or government jihadists. And right now, Israel is working on sending them food. As we're speaking, I have Israeli Jews and Christians and Muslim in Israel coming together, and they're just filling warehouses for Israel to go and send them food because they don't have food, they don't have water, they don't have medicine, they don't have enough doctors to treat a lot of the rape cases that happen there. The Druze is a very religious, minority in terms of seculars in some ways, but also they're very traditional. And for them to even start discussing about treating rape, should the Druze woman, is she allowed to do an abortion or not? But I mean, a jihadist came, killed her father, her husband, her brother, raped her, and she's like 16. Should the Druze allow the abortion in that case or not? So these are the dilemmas that society is, dealing with right now. And on top of that, they're still fighting. People think that they stopped fighting. There's still skirmishes around. IDF, as we're speaking, is going around there and taking down ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Terrorists are trying to still come and plunder and kill because they want to kill the men and kidnap their daughters. The same like they did with the Yazidis and others. So this is still happening. Syria have become a Mad Max of the jihadist world. Like literally, they're coming and flocking, trying to kill. So as we're speaking, the situation is very dire, and the people there are hungry, are starving, are tired. They're standing tall and strong. They won. The mountain was not conquered, and that pissed off many, many Muslims. Same thing like they got pissed when Israel won. When the Jews won, it pissed off a lot of the radical Muslims. So the same thing with the Jews. They won. They stood their ground. The Jews are the only ones in Syria that did not bend the knee to Sharia. That's what's making them so hated.
But even the Muslims they took in under Assad did not stand with them. Those millions of Muslims you said poured in because it was a safe haven.
They betrayed them. These Muslims that were taken under Assad were the Bedouins of Dar'a, which, by the way, Israel built the hospitals for them. They were the ones who actually went and poisoned their wells, assassinated their guards, and infiltrated them, and later raided and they were the ones who came and killed and raped them. So they betrayed them. That was one of the biggest backstabs that the Jews have felt there because they thought that these are our neighbors. We help them. It's the same betrayal that many of the Jews living around Gaza, Otef Gaza, the umbrella around Gaza, felt because they were trying to help the Palestinians. They were betrayed by them. So that is one of the biggest problems. They're not saying all of them betrayed, but the minorities that are remaining peaceful, they're silent. They don't dare to speak.
Yeah. Ooh, well, that sounds rough. And also the deafening silence of the world. I don't know what it tells you. It's I'm at a loss for words to see that, and I'm sure you are too. But we're trying to amplify it and talk about it, and I appreciate you being here and sharing your story. And a lot of, the origins of the word assassin. I never thought I would learn that. So all the you are definitely the bringer of secrets and shedding light onto our audience, and I'm grateful to have heard from you.
Some people believe that the Druze are descended of Atlantis. I've heard that like the other day as well. I was like, that's interesting.
They say a lot of things about Jews too, so whatever.
Yeah, who knows?
Mansor Ashkar, thank you so much for joining us here and being here on the show. We appreciate it. Michael, your microphone's just a little muted if you're trying to get some last final sentiments out. But
sorry.
Yeah.
I was just trying to say your perspective is so interesting and important and useful. And so we'd love to have you back to talk about, I'm sure the news won't stop. So we'd love to have you back here.
It would be my honor.
Thank you so much. Mansor Ashkar, Israeli, Druze, Arab officer in the IDF, and shedding light on what's going on, the actual reality of what's going on in the Middle East. We appreciate your perspective. Thank you for being here on Outrage.